Hello, everyone. LC Holt here, and this is my update for the week of June the 8th. Today, very special show. It is our 100th episode of LC Holt Presents, otherwise known as LC Holt's Weekly Update. It's amazing that I've done 100 of these. That's kind of crazy. Two of the people on the show today have been with me for the majority of the time, I would say. Ryan Rayonec
How you
and
doing?
Rebecca Ivey, thank you guys for joining me for this special show. And I figured on today's show we'd do something different. Something we'd never done before was talk about Quentin Tarantino and his films. And I thought, well, let's pick an appropriate Quentin Tarantino masterpiece, at least what I consider to be a masterpiece. Many of his movies are very, very good. I think he's done more than one masterpiece by my estimation. And as Rebecca knows, I am not a Tarantino sycophant. There are things about Tarantino that irritate the hell out of me. But I can also tell you that I think that he's done some great movies. I'm pretty good at separating the personal from the professional, which is why I can like
Sometimes.
well, I mean, I like Roman Polanski. I like a lot of Polanski's movies, and I think he's a total sleazeball. I mean, there's an example for you. I'm a big fan of something like The Ninth Gate, but I think his ass should be in prison, stuff like that. Now, that said, and it does sort of relate to what we're talking about today. See how I did that with Polanski? Today, we're going to be talking about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I put the ellipses in because it is, if you look at the title, it's Once Upon a Time dot 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 in Hollywood. Though sometimes it's Once Upon a Time in dot 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 Hollywood. But however which way you want to say it, this was, I think, a very it's an unusual Tarantino movie. I mean, it's an unusual movie as a whole, but all of his movies are unusual. But even within sort of the Tarantino verse, I think it's safe to say this was an unusual movie. I figured I'd start out today by talking about the inception of this flick. I remember hearing a couple years ago uh, about him doing a lot of research and reading and watching films about 1969. He seemed to have gone into a very interesting period of study about that year, especially that year in cinema and in Hollywood, because a lot of people consider 69 to be like the last death knell on old school Hollywood. That's when we were starting to transition out of the studio system. And by the time you got into the early 70s, you were really into independent filmmaking, easy rider. So I don't know that it necessarily, old Hollywood ended in 69, but a lot of people do consider that to be like the final year of that era before you start moving
It was a
into.
big year in general.
It was a big year in general, yes. I mean, we lost several very well-known figures, Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King, for example, in 69. And a lot of stuff was going on. There was a cultural shift. There was, well, we're going to start talking about it today. A lot of people say that the innocence of Hollywood, even though I don't think Hollywood was ever innocent, officially died with the Manson murders. Um, it definitely was a wake up call, I think, the Manson murders. And again, that was something that came out about this movie. I remember very distinctively hearing that Quentin Tarantino was going to do a movie set in 69 in Hollywood, and it was going to be all about the Manson murders.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we've seen the movie, all three of us. And I mean, I very much enjoyed it. Ryan,
I loved it.
Rebecca?
The ending's satisfying to me.
Yes. Well, I mean, anyone that knows me, I mean, we're not going to spoil the ending just yet, but anybody that knows me knows that I fucking love that ending, right? I don't know. Who was it? I think somebody saw it before I did and said, "You're going to love this ending." Was that you, Ryan? I can't remember.
Probably. Yeah, I think, didn't you see it like right before me? And I told you don't tell me anything. It was probably, yeah, that was probably it.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so that was. But anyway, we'll go back a little bit before we get into all that and talk about the inception of this. For about 5 years, Tarantino worked on this. And he had said it several times he didn't know if it was going to be a documentary, if it was going to be a play, or he for a while he wrote it as a novel. Um, And which is not unusual for Tarantino. When he's writing stuff and developing it, he tries different things. He'll write large chapters of the book that have nothing to, or the screenplay that have nothing to do with the final film. He even says that in the final script, sometimes he has scenes in there that have nothing to do with the final film. In other words, will not appear in the film. But he just uses them to help the reader understand the story and kind of to help, him along in conceiving it. So, for instance, there are sections in this movie that he had originally written in play form. So he played around a lot with the characters. The oldest character in terms of like the inception of the story, the first character he created was the character of Cliff Booth. And Cliff Booth is a stuntman in the story. And he was created by Tarantino in a short story that he had written, a prose short story called Misadventure. And that turned out to be sort of the backstory of Cliff Booth in the movie. Because in the movie, much is made of Cliff Booth having a wife who died under mysterious circumstances. And the question is, did he murder her or was it an accident? And this story
I thought it was a great part of the film too, because Cliff's got interesting morals the whole time. Where even if he did it, you kind of didn't want it to be that guy. So
yeah, exactly.
It was good. It was very well done, which most of Tarantino stuff is.
Well, what's
all
interesting,
of it's well done. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. It's all good.
Well, what's interesting about this short story Misadventure is it is the story of what happened on the boat. So it told what happened with Cliff and his wife. And his wife's name's Billy. It revealed the truth. But the thing about the movie is that you don't see that. You know what I mean? And so the only person who actually got to read the short story was Brad Pitt. Tarantino handed him the short story and said, this is what happened on the boat. But he wanted to leave it a mystery for the audience and for everybody else who was reading the script. So apparently only 2 people know what actually happened on that boat. Did Cliff murder his wife, Billy, who was played eventually in the movie by Rebecca Ivey, or was it an accident with the harpoon? What do you think, Ryan? Do you think he murdered Billy? Do you think she was just too crazy for him? Too much of a nag, a shrew?
I think if he murdered her, she had it coming.
You think so?
I agree with his little set of outlook, in the movie. So. No, not that you should just. I think the better thing to do, if you're listening to this, is just file for divorce. It's way easier. It'll cost you way less money. You don't have to look over your shoulder. But you got to harpoon a bitch. He probably did.
Yeah. What about you, Rebecca? Is Cliff innocent? Is he not? Do you think he murdered that woman?
I don't know. Part of me says yes, but then part of me is like, well, I think it would be more interesting if he didn't. Mm-hmm. And everyone says he does. And so he has to live with this thing that he didn't do that everyone thinks he did.
What's fascinating about the movie is you say live with it. A big part of Cliff's character is that this has followed him throughout his life.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's messed up his career opportunities as well.
That's right. And I don't know if it was intentionally based around like the Robert Wagner thing. Maybe I'm thinking boat, wife, mysterious death. But, as a lot of Robert Wagner and a lot of people think that he had something to do with the death of his wife, Natalie Wood. They were off on a boat. Christopher Walken was on the boat, too. And then Natalie mysteriously drowned, even though she was afraid of water. Robert Wagner said she tried to get in a boat in the night and fell and drowned. And a lot of people, there's a big, huge mystery about whether there was foul play involved or what. But whenever we had the boat scene with Cliff Booth, it kind of brought to mind that sort of Robert Wagner thing,
Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great if Christopher Walken could talk to us about it for 10 minutes and we still don't know what happened?
That's the weird thing about it. Yeah, I mean, people. It might come in like Chris Walken's writer, don't ask about the Natalie Wood thing, but I've never actually heard him talk about it at all. I've seen documentaries where policemen who interviewed them talked about what he said, and Chris Walken's thing was he went to bed and when he woke up, they were looking for her. But there have been multiple stories. Like the guy who drove the boat has changed his story a couple times. He said that there was this big argument in which Robert Wagner accused Natalie Wood of of flirting with Chris Walken and like, what are you trying to do? You'd rather be with him and all this, and they had a fight. And so I don't know. Who knows? We'll probably never know. But that question, it pops up. I mean, not that long ago, we had more stories about Robert Wagner and will the truth come out? So that story, even though that happened, what was that, late 70s, early 80s when Robert Wagner's wife, when Natalie Wood died? I mean,
it's been a long time.
Yeah, and it still rears its head every so often.
I had never heard Christopher Walken was on that boat either.
Yeah, that's kind of a little known fact. But anyway, back to Once Upon a Time. It's interesting because Tom Cruise was in consideration for the role of Cliff Booth.
No, thank God that didn't happen.
Yes, yeah, I don't know what happened there, but QT decided.
Why did they keep casting him? I'm saying it. I am saying it. Is he really that big of a draw anymore?
It's called a gang with power.
Well, I mean, the Mission Impossible movies, they make money, but isn't that because they're Mission Impossible movies? I mean, there's sort of a built-in audience.
The last one didn't do as well, did it? Is what
I mean, well, the Mummies, bombed.
That one, yeah.
What was that? Was it American? What was the one that he did with the where he was helping he was selling the cocaine or whatever, and he was laundering the money.
Where he was a pilot.
That one wasn't bad.
Yeah, I don't remember the title of it, but I know the one you're talking about. Well, the one reason I was saying it was kind of ironic with this movie is because Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise notoriously do not like each other.
Okay, so now I'm a Brad Pitt fan.
Yes, something happened. Something happened on that movie, Interview with a Vampire, and they do not like each other at all. I mean, I remember Valkyrie and which I really love, and Inglourious Bastards came out the same year, and I remember
I liked both of them.
And I remember an interview where Brad Pitt was like, "Yeah, don't watch that other one, that other World War II movie. Ours is much better." So he'll get fucking snarky about Tom Cruise if you bring it up. Which I always wanted to know, where did this beef start? Where did the long-standing feud begin?
Someone grabbed the last sandwich off the craft service table. That's where it started.
Maybe so.
Is there ever a last sandwich on the craft service table, though? Like, I've never actually seen that before. It's usually like, we have so much and you can't have any.
Well, the funny thing about it, too, is it's like, I think Brad Pitt would be the guy who would grab the sandwich because, munchies. Brad Pitt is a big-time pothead and is unapologetic about it, and more power to him. But luckily...
Or maybe he wiped his butt with a Ronell, the Hubbard book, in front of Tom Cruise.
Well, we're not going to touch that one.
Sorry.
But
he just did it to really get under his skin.
That would do it. That would do it for sure. Now, the thing about this movie is, so you had Cliff. Well, let's now talk about Rick Dalton. Rick Dalton is the second character created, and he turns out to be the neighbor of on Cielo Drive of Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate within the story. I remember watching Rick Dalton's TV shows. Bounty Law was one of my favorites. It came on right between Rawhide and Bonanza, as I recall. And Cliff Booth was his stuntman. I once considered doing this entire show as if we were living in the Tarantino verse, and we would be talking about these people as if they were historical figures. But I was like, that's kind of limiting. So that's the only part I'm going to do, as if this all actually happened. I would have had to show up more than 5 minutes before the show for that one. I wish this had actually happened. I'll put it that way, in more ways than one. But Quentin said that he was inspired to write this relationship between Cliff and Rick Dalton based on a relationship between an actor that he knew and the actor's stuntman. And he said the actor was aging, the stuntman was getting older. He said at one point these two guys would have been identical matches, but now, it's not really working so well. And he said what really inspired this relationship with the characters was the actor in question, who I assumed was Kurt Russell. Okay, because he said it was an actor that he had worked with recently. So I thought, he must be talking about Kurt Russell in, either Death Proof or in The Hateful Eight. Come to find out, he was talking about Burt Reynolds. Apparently, he was
Kurt
talking.
Russell killed Death Proof.
He was great in Death Proof, and I really liked him in The Hateful Eight. But he was especially good, I think, in Death Proof, playing a stuntman, stuntman Mike. So Quentin loves his stuntman. But anyway, Quentin was particularly inspired by the fact that the actor once came up to him and said, well, is there anything we could do with this stuntman of mine? I mean, you know, I know there's no real stunts or anything, but could we get him a job doing something? And Quentin was like, well, yeah, we could maybe figure something out. And so that inspired, and if you watch the movie, that's kind of Rick and Cliff's relationship. Nobody wants to hire Cliff because of the wife thing and because they just think he's nothing but trouble. But Rick is kind of his loyal friend who keeps saying, could we give him something to do in this? You know, he's my buddy. And go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, she played such a great hateful person in that film too. Like she hated him so much, it came right through the screen.
Oh, are you talking about the woman that didn't want to hire him?
Yeah. She nailed. I couldn't remember her character's name in the movie, but she drilled that.
Yeah, Kurt Russell in this movie's wife. The actress,
yeah, correct.
Yeah, the actress is Zoe Bell, who was in Death Proof. Remember, she was the stunt woman in Death Proof, the main character.
Oh, that's right. That's right. It's been a long. I haven't seen it in a long time. Death Proof was a while ago, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, she was the New Zealand. She is actually from New Zealand. And now Quentin said the first thing he came up for with this movie was the ending, and then he worked backwards, which is unusual for him. Because usually he writes like a novelist. He starts at the beginning and he writes all the way to the end. And sometimes he says he doesn't even know the ending when he starts. He just discovers it as he's writing. You know, and since Quentin has a lot of time on his hands and can take a year to finish a script, that works for him. You know, I mean, it's not like Quentin's hurting for money, right? So that's sort of what he likes.
Golden Girl residuals.
Exactly. And he likes to write like a novelist, even as a screenwriter. But in this way, he worked differently. Originally, he had conceived the story as being sort of like an Elmore Leonard type plot. And then what he discovered as he was writing was, well, you know, these characters are so interesting. Maybe I could just do this as like a day in the life. Like maybe not even have a plot. And then that's how the script developed. And I think this is a distinction between people who like this movie and people who don't like this movie, so far as I can see. I think the real distinction is people who don't like it don't get it because there's not a plot.
Yeah, and I've heard that.
Yes.
From friends of mine.
Get over it.
They go, I don't, you know, they're like, it was boring, nothing really happened, and then the end, and then...
And
what happened?
I didn't find it to be boring at all.
And let's see, my point of view is this. It's like, maybe it's because I'm into old Hollywood. I'm into like 1969. To me, like just having scenes where I'm riding with Cliff and his Carmen Gia and fucking Deep Purple's playing on the radio and you see the actual 1960s logos and billboards and shit. I'm like, man, I wish I could have been there. Like, this is so cool because I feel like I'm in this car with this dude, with this, like, cool stuntman I'd kind of like to have a beer with, you know, listening to some fucking Deep Purple. You know, to me, I love that. So I think it's a matter of whether you just want to sink into the movie and let the movie just sort of take you, or whether you say, well, I want something to be happening all the time, you know?
I think it had a lot of expectations. Maybe that's why. I think like when this movie came out, like everyone kind of knew, like, oh, this is interesting, but no one knew kind of exactly where it was going, and you just all kind of had to find out with each other.
Yes, so. And well, tell me what you think about this. I know that this movie was heavily publicized at first as being Quentin Tarantino's Manson movie.
Yeah.
So I think that maybe people went into it thinking, oh, this is going to be a thriller or something about Charles Manson, and it's not really what the movie's about. Like,
he actually went out of the way. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I say he went out of the way to not over glorify them. He made them look, you know, as much as the assholes that they are. Yeah. So you know, even that part I noticed when I was watching it. You know, I've still only seen this film once. I saw it the one time. You know, I watched it in the theater. I haven't seen it since. When Manson comes into the picture, he doesn't even let the camera focus. You know, and part of that could be, you know, from a director standpoint, you could take both sides. You could say, well, yeah, but that way we don't have to have like an exact Charlie Manson, to make this aura, whatever. But at the same time, you're also kind of, ignoring this guy too. So I thought it was done well. I thought he picked the right way to approach a very what otherwise could be delicate, situation.
I think also the trailer. When I first saw the trailer, I thought he was going to be in more of it than what he was in, if that makes sense. Because the way they talk about, the cuts
did want to
that they
see a little bit of
used,
Charlie. I did want to see someone try to portray that.
I guess I don't know. I guess when I first heard about it, I kind of thought maybe like, and then when I saw the trailer, because I didn't really know much about it, I guess I thought it was going to be kind of like maybe one of the characters would be kind of like, oh, what's his face from the Beach Boys, and kind of
Brian Wilson.
Yeah,
I thought that too.
Would be kind of like one that would go hang out with him or something, and
yes,
that's how he would be in the movie, and then the thing would happen at the end.
And it even, if you look at the trailer, it even suggests that maybe Cliff is going to be that guy.
That's the one I thought he was going to be the drummer.
Because remember, it shows the scene where he's on the roof, and that is in the movie where he has the flashback to his wife. But in the trailer, they cut it where it looks like he's on the roof and he looks down and Charles Manson waves at him.
Yeah.
Which is incidentally, that Charles Manson wave is not in the movie. There were many scenes with Manson that were shot that were cut out of the movie. So really, Manson is only in a couple scenes. I think he is actually in 2 scenes in the movie. He's talked about, and his presence is there with his family members, but you don't see him. Go ahead, Ryan.
What a bad break for whoever landed that role.
Yeah, it's interesting because the guy that played that also played Charles Manson in the Netflix show Mindhunter. I don't know if you've seen Mindhunter.
No, I haven't seen it.
But it's about serial killers, and he's like the go-to Charlie Manson kind of guy, because he's played him twice now. One in Mindhunter, and then once Once Upon a Time. I do want to say
token Mexican from Training Day, who's like the Mexican in every movie.
He's the Charles Manson in every movie, pretty much. Well, I want to talk about the casting of Sharon Tate. Originally, talk was that Jennifer Lawrence was going to play Sharon Tate, and that's somebody that Quentin Tarantino talked about. I know Rebecca loves her some Jennifer Lawrence. I'm joking.
People are gonna hate me because I'm like Tom Cruise, Jennifer Lawrence.
But eventually, who Quentin settled for was, no, she was a great choice. That's a wrong choice of words on my part. Eventually, who Quentin cast was Margot Robbie.
Which I liked her in it.
She was great. She looked like Sharon Tate. In fact, there's a movie where Margot Robbie as Sharon Tate goes to watch The Wrecking Crew. And on the screen, they use footage from The Wrecking Crew, and that's Sharon Tate on screen. And if you look at the woman on screen and you look at the person in the theater who is supposed to be the same person, they look like the same person. It's really very good casting. I think a lot of people don't even know that is the real Sharon Tate on the movie screen. It's not Margot Robbie reenacting the scenes. And so she invited Tarantino invited his 3 main cast members over to the house to talk about the script and to read it. Tarantino learned after the Hateful Eight debacle not to give out the script to anybody. Don't let anybody take it home. So he invited DiCaprio and Pitt and Margot Robbie to his house, and they had a private read-through of the one copy. Because I don't know if you remember, but it was famous when the Hateful Eight script leaked. He wrote a first draft. He gave it to 3 people, Bruce Stern, Tim Roth, I think, and Michael Madsen, and somebody leaked it. And he was pissed. Quentin Tarantino saw red. He almost didn't make the Hateful Eight because he said, look, if the script's out there for everybody to read, why am I even fucking bothering? He nearly washed his hands of the whole project. Ultimately, he went back and he wrote a couple more drafts of the script, and the Hateful Eight got made. But I remember that was a big deal. So I don't think Quentin will ever be giving out scripts again before production anyway. So that's
probably wasn't one of the actors. It was probably like sitting on their counter with some notes in it, and somebody was like, ooh.
Or some agent somewhere, scanned it, something like that. Quentin Tarantino, I was telling you about. Tarantino gave Brad Pitt the misadventure short story to bring him up to speed on Cliff's backstory. Well, he did something similar to with DiCaprio. He gave him like some of Rick Dalton's past credits, and he also had written, just for fun, Quentin wrote 5 episodes of the TV show Bounty Law, which the fictional show that Dalton.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, he gave that.
That is some fine shit right there.
that is some awesome. Fine shit. Well, what's even better, and I don't know if this will ever happen, but Tarantino has talked about wanting to do like a limited series. Well, no, yeah, do a limited series where it's like just on streaming or something, and you can watch 5 episodes of Bounty Law starring Rick Dalton.
What dedication, man! What dedication!
Yeah, love it. I do love it. Now I'm starting to get into a little bit of a serious subject here with the actual like victims of the crime perpetrated. When the film was announced as a Quentin Tarantino Charles Manson movie, with just that byline, pretty much, Deborah Tate, who was Sharon Tate's sister, went out publicly and said that she didn't like the idea of it. She thought, she didn't know what the movie was going to be. All she heard was Tarantino, Charles Manson. And as anybody knows...
You also have to think how many of these kind of films that she's had to endure since it happened, and how they're usually like these cheesy, terribly made, Lifetime type movies.
And usually, I mean, honestly, they usually focus on Manson. Movies like Helter Skelter and stuff like that. And then it's about him and his family. And then the victims just happen to be an incidental,
And it's not even that too. It's not just the movies. If she living through this back, for people who were younger, there was a time when Charles Manson stuff came on the television all the time. There'd be like an hour CBS report, documentary on this, just because people are fascinated by this shit. So they would constantly use the name, to make this and that and this. And I didn't even know, like as a young kid, like, I'm just wondering, why is this guy on TV all the time? You would think like they wouldn't want to show this, but.
And I mean, the parole hearings, remember? Every Manson family member who was in prison, whenever they went up for parole, it was televised live, sort of.
And the fact that, the victims did get kind of lost in it, Yeah. And you also have to think a pregnant woman with a baby that was about to be born was murdered, and the way, just the whole way it was done. And then they just got to live their lives out in prison. I mean, some people would say, well, that's not a life, but
it's more of a life than they got.
More than what they got, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, like I was saying, Deborah Tate was not too thrilled about this. And so Quentin Tarantino, hearing about her concerns, called her up and said he'd like to take her to dinner. And so he did that. He took Deborah Tate to dinner, and he brought the script. And he said the only person he let have the script was Deborah Tate. He gave her the script. He said, read it and then tell me what you think. And so Deborah Tate took the script. She read it. And then she said when she read it, she understood what the movie was and really changed her opinion about it. And she said she really thought that Tarantino was a stand-up guy for doing that because he didn't have to. Here's the thing. If someone dies, the moment they're dead, you can write anything you want about them and have no legal recourse whatsoever. So you could write any kind of movie with Sharon Tate in it and make her look as horrible as you want to for whatever reason you might want to do that. Her family couldn't say a damn word about it. You're free game as soon as you're dead, basically, which is a shame.
Weird laws.
It's a shame. But
hopefully
anyway,
isn't it one day?
I would like it to be,
because you would think like, say for example, say you had a famous relative or whatever in Hollywood, but you weren't you want to know part of this shit, but your estate in the future income kind of depends on what people think of whatever family member you may have. So it's like, I see a legal argument why this is kind of messed up.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And like Deborah Tate said, Tarantino didn't have to do that. There was no obligation to do that, but
But
he
you know
did
what?
do
More
it.
people should. More people should. You know, like a lot of people don't consider sometimes you're writing something about someone that's going to affect their life. It's going to it's going to affect how people perceive them. It might affect something that they never even thought would be affected. You know, and then later their life it has some sort of gray area because you wanted to make some money. You know, and it's not always about money. You know, some filmmakers, like you said with Tarantino, it's not really about the money anymore. He's doing what he wants to do.
Oh
But
yeah.
you know, more people should take the time to consider what they're working with and how it's going to affect other people.
I agree. I agree completely, completely. It was kind of cool though, because Deborah Tate was so into helping him out with the film that she talked to Margot Robbie. She gave Margot Robbie some of her sister's jewelry to wear. She gave her perfume to wear to help her get into the character. And there's Dr. Saperstein, her and Roman Polanski's dog, the dog carrier that Margot Robbie has as Sharon Tate is Sharon Tate's actual dog carrier.
That's
So
so cool.
Deborah Tate donated a lot of stuff to the production to help Margot Robbie and ultimately the whole thing. I was talking about Burt Reynolds earlier. Burt Reynolds was originally cast in this movie to play George Spahn, the owner of Spahn Ranch, who has a very memorable scene with Cliff. They had a table read with Burt Reynolds, but he was in failing health, and unfortunately he died just prior to them starting to film. So he did play George Spahn for the table read, but did not actually get to make it to the film. So one of Burt Reynolds' old friends and someone who had collaborated with Tarantino twice before, Bruce Dern, stepped in and took the role at the last second and played George Spahn.
What situation that guy had.
Who is that? George Spahn?
Yeah, in the film.
Yeah, the real guy. Yeah. Blind, living with. Yeah, I tell you what, man, that's an interesting life. And he gave a lot of the Manson girls their nicknames. George Spahn was the one that called Lynette from Squeaky, for instance. He gave a lot of those kids the names that they're even now known for,
It
and that
was
are
Flavor
actually.
of Love, decades before its time.
Yeah, pretty much so. Yeah. Another famous person who was cast in this movie, but she intentionally dropped out. It wasn't a matter of deaths, which is something you can't control, is Jessica Lange. She was originally cast as Al Pacino's character's wife in the movie, but she dropped out. And, I don't think there's any great, I don't think we lost very much there. Oh, God, did I say that? Yeah, okay. I worked with Jessica Lange one time. That's all I'm going to say about that, though. But she was originally going to be in the movie. Now, Quentin Tarantino cut ties with the Weinstein Company. He'd been with the Weinsteins ever since early Miramax days. They're the ones who discovered him. They did not produce Reservoir Dogs, but everything Pulp Fiction forward were produced by, the Weinsteins. Harvey Weinstein had his sex scandal, and immediately Quentin Tarantino cut ties with Weinsteins and their company, which opened up the doorway for a bidding war. Every studio in town wanted Tarantino's next project. But Sony Pictures is who won it. You know how they won it? They promised him full creative control, because why not? They promised him final cut, because hell, he's Quentin Tarantino. They promised him a $90 million budget, because Tarantino said CGI is shit. I'm not doing CGI for 1969. We're going to actually create 1969 in the streets of modern Los Angeles. There will be no CGI, even though there's a couple shots of CGI that tie locations together, but very minor stuff. I mean, I think there's one CGI shot where Rick is in his pool and you pull across the roof, and then that ties you into the Cielo Drive location, and you see Sheridan Roman come out. But that's a really minor CGI shot. In terms of like creating billboards and backgrounds and theater marquees, he was like, no. Quentin Tarantino's like, no, listen. That's going to actually be created on the streets of Los Angeles. I'm not having it. And that was his actual. I was in the room with him. That's how I know it verbatim.
Fucking love it.
But that was full creative control for Quentin, and obviously his.
I want to get the guy a trophy. Like, don't even put a label on it. Just here's a trophy.
And it's pretty amazing because they had to negotiate with like Los Angeles city planners and shit to make sure that, because what they would do is they would do like Sunset Boulevard, they would do one whole side for a certain number of blocks, and then retrofit it 1969 style. And they went back to what actual businesses were there in 69, what movies were playing on the marquee in February of 69. They got into all this real minutia that probably is on screen, if at all, for a split second out a car window. But they actually discovered what that would be. And so they would, one night, they would do all one side of the street, and then they would shoot that, like the angle going toward that side of the street. And then it could be a few weeks later, they'd prep the other side of the street, and then they'd shoot the other angle going the other way. So they had to be tricky about how they did it because they were organizing a lot of city planners and business owners and shit like that. But they actually managed to do all that without CGI. Obviously, you need money. So that's hence the $90 million budget.
And the name Tarantino.
Yes, you definitely need the name Tarantino, because if L.C. Holt said we're going to do that, they would be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Get the hell out of here. They're not going to listen to me. They're going to say, we're going to CGI it all. And then that's when I sook Ryan on him.
Give it time.
He's my bulldog. Ryan's my bulldog. The Playboy Mansion was the real Playboy Mansion. Now, this was after the death of Hugh Hefner, so it was a new homeowner, and the new homeowner was renovating the mansion. So they had to negotiate with him in order to...
You think that'd be like, that's a wishy-washy... You got to have a lot of money to do that, because you're taking a big risk renovating it. You know, if I bought the Playboy Mansion, I don't know if I'd want to touch anything.
I mean, isn't the point of owning the Playboy Mansion to keep it looking like
the fact
Playboy
that you
Mansion?
own the Playboy Mansion? I mean,
why would you just buy another mansion or build one? You know, I mean, if you're so specific about having the Playboy Mansion, I would think that would be the point. You know,
at that point, it's not a money issue if you've got the money to buy it in the first place. I don't get people. I don't get so much of what people do.
It's also like what is it, Marilyn Monroe's house? You know, that they say that some of the people that have owned it over the years are annoyed that people come. Like, well, you bought the house she died in.
Yes.
This is like a famous home of this incident that happened that we're really not sure what happened. There's so much controversy. So of course people are going to make this pilgrimage there to want to go look at it.
I think it's the same reason Michael Jordan's house has been on the market for quite a while, besides the fact that it was like $30 million. You know, everyone's like, yeah, well, this is awesome and everything, but it's 100% his house. You know, you can't get around it. So it's been on the market for a while.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of an interesting segue, too, when we talk about, the Playboy Mansion. The only other thing I wanted to say about that is that they did negotiate with the guy, and they restored, like, the pool area, and that the outside, they made it look like it did circa 69.
Whoa, hold on. You're telling me he messed with the pool?
I think he did, yeah. The grotto.
Look at that face.
The waterfall.
There's so much I'm taking in for the first time, and you got to do it, you know. Oh man, right. Is the guy? Do you know anything about the actual person who, like, what type of?
I have no idea.
He's going to be using Spokio after the show to look at this person.
I think I've met another.
Ryans want to know. What's wrong with you?
I've met another person that Ryan needs to sick now. Is this Playboy?
You could, but I mean, just if you were low on money, you could charge people $1,000 for like an hour in the grotto. Like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah, you could charge for parties.
Damn.
Oh yeah, imagine the parties you could have at the Playboy Mansion. Just imagine.
100%. 100%. Can you imagine just telling people, yeah, I'm gonna leave for 8 hours. You could do whatever you want here as long as you don't break shit. Pay me.
Or just have a second house that's your real house, and that's your party house.
Yeah, only rent it out for venues.
Yeah.
I mean, you could justify the cost of that in what, like a week?
Yeah.
Was the guy Chinese? This almost like feels like an attack against America.
I have no idea. I have no idea who owned the.
Who would do this?
You're gonna have to research this on your own.
Maybe I'll just take China out, so I'm not singling out anybody. I'll just say the UN. You know what I mean? Who at the UN thought this was a good idea?
I don't know. Who would the Gestapo? That would be a better one. Who would the Gestapo? Because we know that they're. But anyway, let me talk now. Let me shift from the Playboy Mansion over to the Tate House, because
Bruce Lee in here too before this is over.
Who?
Bruce Lee.
Oh, we're going to. Oh, trust me, that's coming.
Because ESPN even dinged me while I'm doing the show, and they said something about Bruce Lee. Well, this is going. So if I forget it during the show, it's my fault.
No, we're getting there. But here we go. We're going to jump right over to the Cielo Drive House, and then we're going to head to Bruce Lee as we're taking a tour. The Cielo Drive House, where the Tate and Polanski lived, No longer exists. It's now an enormous mansion. It was tore down. There's this mansion that's 6 times its size sitting on that hill. So they had to be a little trickier when they were recreating that. They used 3 different locations, one for the exterior, which is a house that kind of looked like the Cielo Drive house. Then they used a different house for all the interior stuff with the kind of the high beam ceilings and stuff like that. And then they used like a backlot, a universal backlot area for that little cul-de-sac, where Rick lives, where the drive leads up to the house and the gate of the Polanski house. So that they had to be kind of trickier in how they recreated because, again, no CGI, preferably. Now we're going to talk about what Ryan had just mentioned. Bruce Lee, there is an infamous scene in this movie where Cliff Booth squares off on the set of The Green Hornet with Bruce Lee. It's a very controversial scene. Many people, Shannon Lee and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, just to name a couple, did not like the portrayal of their father and friend, respectively, Bruce Lee in this movie. I definitely want to get you guys' opinion about Bruce Lee in this movie because I kind of have my own opinion, and we'll talk about what Quentin Tarantino says, his justification of it. Rebecca, I'm just going to start with you. What do you think about the Bruce Lee sequence?
I didn't think it was. I thought it kind of made him look kind of slapsticky and silly. That's my opinion. Now I liked this. I mean, obviously, of course, he didn't really talk or anything. The training scenes with him and Sharon Tate, because he did train her for that film. I thought that would have been more interesting of a way to have him more in the film is do that rather than have him have a standoff with,
Cliff.
Yeah, and not make him look as silly. To me,
Now,
I just, because I thought it was I understand, this is supposed to be fictional. We're just doing a fun little scene. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, he has fans, he has family and friends, the same as Sharon Tate does, and they want to see this movie and they want to see them not look like idiots. So yeah, right. I can understand how they felt. So before I saw it, I was like, well, no, but then I saw it and I thought, yeah, it was a little. I thought it was a little bit silly the way he was portrayed in that scene. But like I said, I wish they would have focused more on him training Sharon Tate, his friendship with Sharon Tate. I think that would have been more interesting. But that's just me. That was the only thing.
Ryan, what do you think?
I'm gonna weird. I like it overall. I think the part they kind of messed up on was I think they made him too douchebaggy, and Bruce Lee wasn't a douchebag. Or if it wasn't around any, it was never when cameras are on, or it was never when, anything we've heard about, or for the most part, he's pretty universally admired in a lot of ways. The thing I like where we introduced him to the idea of like, whoa, dude, like he may not have, like, I'm not even saying he wasn't, he was a great martial artist. He's one of the fathers of mixed martial arts in one way or another, even though you'll take the wrestling out of it. But on the other end, we pump people up, for movie purposes and for the point of sales so much without anyone on the other side being like, well, I don't agree with this, 100%. And Ronda Rousey is like a great example of that. People thought Ronda was so tough that on television, in front of other people, Dana White, who's not stupid, says, yeah, if she gets in there with Floyd Mayweather and Octagon, she's going to take Floyd out. I'm sorry. She doesn't land a punch. She's unconscious in less than 5 seconds. Period. 1,000 times out of 1,000, you got no shot. You're dead on contact. You ain't going to wrestle. You're dead. So as great as Bruce Lee was, for 130 pounds. So you got to remember, for 130 pounds, I watched all this stuff, this week about, how many pounds per square inch this guy did this and how many, how good it kicks. I'm sorry. There is no movie you could make if you're 130 pounds where I'm not trying to scoop you up, double leg you, and just grind elbows into the tip of your brain. I can't. I grew up watching Enter the Dragon. I used to love when it came on TV. Like, I have no natural dislike for Bruce Lee at all. But I just the whole realm though of this guy could just fight anyone on earth, but great precision. His hands were amazing. I was watching some of his bag where it's like, I mean, I want to say in this gray area because he was phenomenal, and I'm not saying he wasn't, but at the same token, being phenomenal 130 pounds is not the same as, you're not going to fight John Jones. I don't care how good you are. You're not going to fight John Jones. It's not going to happen. You're not going to win. It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't care how many movies you make. You're not going to win. So I think at least I liked it. You know what I mean? I just think they should have done it maybe a little different. Who am I to say? It was fucking Tarantino.
Well, here's my thing about it. I do think that there is a sense of Bruce Lee where because he died so young, and remember, he was a very young man. And I do watch videos of him when he talks, and it's like, it sounds like a man in his late 20s who thinks he knows everything and, has a little bit of an ego. And, you were a young man and you didn't know everything. But if you hear him talk sometimes, it sounds like he's a 70-year-old sage, But that's okay. There's nothing wrong with having...
The reason, though, because I've had that impression too, and the reason I've never really let any of that get to me is because he's almost always saying something positive.
And that's true, but let me finish what I was saying about that, though.
I think I'm at a second delay.
The thing about it but I do think Bruce Lee was a very talented man, and there were a lot of people who talked about his relationship to stuntmen and stuff as being something that he very much respected. In other words, he didn't go nuts on a stuntman on sets because he could, But there are some instances, and this might have been what Quentin Tarantino was basing the scene on. There was this famous story about when they did Batman and Robin meets the Green Hornet, in which they were going to have a scene in which Robin easily defeated Kato. And there's an old Hollywood story about Bruce Lee saying, "There's no way I'm doing this scene. I'm not just going to easily get beat up by Robin."
Well, you remember me complaining about that episode because I loved
did.
Green Hornet when I was a kid, and it was like, oh, Batman and Robin saved them, and Robin I'm
yeah. Well, there's
Green
an infamous
Hornet, this guy. We're so much tougher than them. Like Bruce Lee would snap you over his knee, little man, little Burt Ward.
Well, that was the thing about this is what. But let me finish what the story was. The story was that on the set, and I don't know if this is true. This could be a bullshit Hollywood apocryphal thing, but the story is on the set when they were filming it. Bruce Lee broke out with some moves and kind of came at Burt Ward a little bit, and they said Burt Ward shot out of the set. He was so terrified, and he was like, "Well," he turned to the producers, and Bruce Lee said, "Well, see, that's why nobody's going to believe that Robin could beat me because you see how he just reacted to my doing this move." And so, that you could read that if that's indeed true. It's a little bit of a dicky move, but not unreasonable because he actually has a really good point. Obviously, Kato would kick Robin's ass. Just look at the two of them. But so that might be one thing Quentin Tarantino heard and kind of based the story on. Another thing might be there was a famous situation where Bruce Lee and Gene LaBelle were buddies, And there was and Gene LaBelle used to be a stuntman in Hollywood as well as being many, many other things. And there's a story where they were on a set together, and Gene LaBelle and they were sort of playing around a little bit, like not really fighting, but sort of playing around. And the story is Gene LaBelle scooped, Bruce Lee up and carried him around, and Bruce Lee was saying, I'll kill you, put me down." And Gene LaBelle said, he put him down and they were kind of joking, "Well, you might kill me if I didn't put you down, But that wasn't a real fight between the stuntman and the actor.
See, that's different. That's not them being like machismo assholes that don't know each other. This is just two friends who respect each other goofing off.
Exactly. But those are two instances that Quentin Tarantino might have based that sequence off of, because there are several things. But anyway, I want to move on because we're getting lower on time, and there's some other things I want to hit on. There's a lot I want to hit on with this movie. Another thing I want to hit on is I think the sequence at Spawn Ranch, where Cliff goes to Spawn Ranch. He gives Flower Child a lift there, and there's this incredible suspense sequence, incredible by my estimation.
I loved it.
Yeah, where Cliff is there, and it leads all the way up to, because at first he has this kind of, okay, you're living on George Spawn's ranch, and who are all these other people? And George knows about this. So Cliff is kind of, his ears are perked. about these weirdo hippies, because there's a lot of talk of the weirdo hippies. Rick Dalton hates hippies, and we'll get more into that here when we talk about the ending. But Cliff isn't too keen on him either. And but Cliff's just not as outwardly. He's a little more laid back.
Got to get more Rick into this too, because he killed it too.
I know. I'm trying.
DiCaprio, we haven't even brought him up, and he filleted this thing.
I'm trying to. I got 10 minutes left of this show. We might have to go a little bit over. I'm trying to get as much in as I can. But this is the 100th episode, so if we go over just a little bit, that might be all right. But anyway, so Cliff is on Spawn Ranch, and there's a great sequence that leads all the way up into the shack of George Spawn's house, where Squeaky Fromm, played by an unrecognizable Dakota Fanning. I did not know that was Dakota Fanning playing Squeaky. She kind of has a little bit of a verbal standoff with Cliff, and you get the impression that, oh, what is George dead back there, or are they keeping his body, or is he chained to the bed or something? And if you don't know anything about the case, there's a lot of good reason to believe something like that might have happened. But anyway, so Cliff goes back and he has his scene with George, and then he walks outside, and the tension is kind of built up. And this is, I think, where Quentin starts to get really clever, because what happens next, actually the whole sequence, but especially what happens next, plays on multiple levels depending on how much you know about the Manson family and their crimes. Because Cliff goes to his car, which is actually Rick's car, and trivia, it's also the car that Michael Madsen drove in Reservoir Dogs, which Michael Madsen bought that car and owns it, and Quentin borrowed it back to have it be Rick's car in this movie. But anyway, what you see in that movie is
Did he change it to a pickup truck like the mansion? Did he change it into a pickup truck before he gave it back? Like, just pretend it's the mansion and make it a hoopty.
No, the Galaxy is totally intact. But anyway, Cliff goes out to the car and he sees that someone has slashed Rick's tire. And then he looks over and he sees this creepy looking little fella perched up on a thing laughing about it. Now, the reason I say that this works on multiple levels, depending on how much you know about the case, is because the guy who's sitting on the fence is mentioned at least once as being nicknamed Clem. Now, in real life, there was a man named Clem Grogan, who was a member of the Manson family, who murdered a Hollywood stuntman, named Shorty Shea at Spawn Ranch, beat him to death with a pipe, and was later convicted of this and went to prison. So if you know that element of the case, this sequence works on a different level, you see, because you go, oh, is Cliff going to be sporty? Like, is this where Clem kills Cliff? Like in real life, he killed the real stuntman? So it kind of adds, but even if you don't know that, it has a great suspense. So it's working on multiple different levels, which I think is a testament to what Tarantino is doing, because Tarantino researched the fuck out of this. I mean, it's not accidental that Clem is the guy that slashed the tire.
Even when you're watching it for the first time, they did a very good job of like making you feel like you were just part of the audience that was also there, just not knowing what was going to happen. It was really, really well done.
That's right. And I think that is something that the day in the life approach to the story helps, because then you're kind of living this, like when you're in a scene where you're just driving around listening to Deep Purple, you're kind of grooving with it and it's kind of a cool feeling. But when you're on Spawn Ranch with Cliff and you're just going through the experience with him and you don't know how it's going to end, the true suspense is built up through that sense of a day in the life, which I think is another a testament to Tarantino's approach to the film, which I really respect. But ironically, in a very good bit of what I call QT justice, because QT did QT justice on Inglourious Bastards too by the end, the way he took out Hitler. And this is the face of Jewish vengeance, all that at the very end. He does some more QT justice in this scene and more later on, where he has Cliff beat the ever-loving shit out of Clem Gorgon. So this time he flips the table. So instead of Clem killing the stuntman with a pipe, which unfortunately is what happened in real life, Cliff beats the fuck out of Clem Grogan, which is a wonderful scene, and then makes him change the tire. you know.
Can I wipe my nose first?
Right, yeah. It throws them over there, and they're all horrified, you know, all of the Manson girls. Now, this is, of course, intercut with a sequence where Rick is on the set of Lancer, real TV show. They had a neat little nod to the actor who starred on Lancer, a guy named James Stacy, who was played by Timothy Olyphant. We seem to be talking about Timothy Olyphant a lot on these last few shows.
Random.
But he played, yeah. But he plays James Stacy, and they have a neat little scene where he gets on his motorbike at the end of the day shooting and drives away, which, again, Tarantino nod to actual fact. James Stacy lost his left arm, leg, and lost his girlfriend in a motorcycle crash. Yeah, so that's again a little foreshadowing nod to what actually happened to the guy, you know, that James Stacy rides off on his motorcycle. You also had Luke Perry in his final film role, playing Wayne Marder, who was also a real life person on Lancer. You know, Luke Perry sadly died of a stroke. I met Luke Perry one time. Very nice guy. A bit of a shame about him. But anyway, I did want to mention that scene. You had the little girl, you know, Trudy. There's a lot made of the little girl. And I know there's been some criticism about maybe the Trudy stuff goes on too long. But I do think it's appropriate for Rick's character because Rick is a guy that's kind of on the outs in Hollywood. You know, his career is, after Bounty Law, it started to go down a bit, you know, and he's questioning his own. And Rick is also not the kind of guy who's very comfortable changing his image to fit the changing times. Like Rick is very much like a 60s guy, you know. And
I thought that scene they had was awesome. That was one of the best scenes of the film when he, you know, he's holding back tears at the end. That was great.
Yeah. She says that was the best acting I've ever seen in my whole life.
Like,
yeah, that's all he needed to hear, you know. But DiCaprio does an incredible job of. It's an improvised scene where he's freaking out in the trailer. You remember that scene where he's just like, "I'm gonna shoot you in the fucking head." He's talking to himself in the mirror. All of that was improvised. They just set up a camera and let DiCaprio go in there and tear up the trailer in character, you know. But yeah, Dalton does not like hippies. There's much made of that. Even when they try to put a beard on him and long hair for Lancer, he's like, "What? I look like a goddamn hippie, aren't I?" You know, he's always chugging down those cigarettes. Now, let's talk about the ending. We got to talk about this ending because we were just talking about QT Justice. And the ending of this movie has got to be one of the more satisfying cinematic experiences I've had in a long time.
It's so good.
Because like the Spawn Ranch sequence, I didn't know where it was going. It started to go a certain way. You know, you see the flower child who is sort of like a Linda Kasabian in Tex, and Sadie is Susan Ack. There may have been legal reasons why Tarantino used their nicknames, but these were all the actual nicknames of the people. Like Susan Atkins' nickname really was Sadie. And like, I think Krenwinkel's name really was Katie, you know, stuff like that. But they are those people.
I love how they built a similar level of like heightened suspense, like we were talking about earlier, in a completely different way. Like that 2-minute standoff where he's like in his own little LSD trip, like what the fuck's going on? It was just, it was the perfect build up where you're like, well, this guy would kill all these guys if he was in his normal state of mind, but you know, now he's all fucked up and he don't know exactly what reality is. It was so good. It was just so good.
Well, I mean, we should say that who you're talking about is Cliff, because Cliff gets an acid cigarette, and he saves this acid cigarette for a special occasion. And that special occasion is going to be Rick's send-off to him, which Rick has gotten married. He's going a different route with his career. He's found some success with Italian Westerns and Italian films in general. And now the two friends are about to part. So they're going to have one last night together. And so Cliff's like, time for an acid cigarette. And then this is all happening in accordance with, or I should say concurrently with, actual events in history. Because you see everything leading up to the four Manson family members arriving at the gate of Sharon Tate's house. But the moment they arrive at Sharon Tate's gate, that's when history diverges. Because that's when Rick hears their rambling ass car outside and decides, what are those hippies doing out there? So then Rick Dalton heads out with his margarita in one hand, or the whole fucking blender thing full of margarita in one hand. And he's got like his robe on. I think he's got a cigarette, and he's walking out there telling those hippies to get their hell out from his house, you know, because he's really ornery when it comes to the hippies, as I said earlier. And there's a neat little moment there where you go, okay, well, how far are we diverging? Like, you do actually think, are these Manson people going to pull out a gun and like kill Rick? Because they could do that. You know, Tex has a gun. And so again, there's this kind of sense, sort of like in the Spawn Ranch thing, how far are we going to deviate from actual history?
Especially situationally, because like in that state of mind, they did it so well going in. Like when I was watching, I was like, I wonder if they're going to kill him.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you actually get a real sense that he could die right here. Like Rick could die in this scene. And even dramatically, you go, oh man, that, like, even thinking from a writer's standpoint, it would make sense if he died right there. You could go with that. But he doesn't die. He actually does scare them off. And they head back down Cielo Drive and stop. And of course, they're going to head back up there. But that's when their plans change, because as I believe it's Sadie, Susan Atkins says to Tex, you know, in that sort of crazy Manson, drugged out hippie logic, wow, he was the guy from Bounty Law. And guys like him taught us violence. So in killing him, we're killing, in a way, the society that taught us violence. You know, all that crazy fucking Manson shit that these people have been brainwashed.
Sounds like what we're going through now.
Yeah, right. But like in history, you remember when we did the Charles Manson show with Linda Kasabian? She didn't want to go inside, and she was the one who was very reticent about this whole thing and wanted to leave. Well, in this movie, she actually does take off in the car. So again, we're going back to good research on Tarantino's part. So he's keeping with the personalities of the actual individuals. Kasabian does book it in this. She did not in real life, but she certainly did not want to be a part of the whole thing. Not to grant her any immunity by any means, but just that was the case. So they go back up to the house and they decide they're going to break into Rick Dalton's house. But what they don't know is Cliff has come back, and he's smoking his acid cigarette and he's tripping a little bit. And then you get this really cool moment where they bust into the house. And as Ryan was saying, Cliff is just kind of like, is this for real? Like, he's kind of playing, because, it's a really random group of people. And they're saying that, like I said, crazy Manson shit, They even threw in the Tex Watson line that he actually did say to one of the victims, where he said, I'm the devil and I'm here to do the devil's work. And Cliff is like, what, really? And he starts laughing, And
that was like the moment, I think, that didn't it kind of turn him on, like, oh, this isn't just drugs. I got to kill these dudes.
Yeah,
that was kind of like the moment.
And that also was, for me, the moment when the joy began. Because the next 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so was just like Elsie Holt ecstasy. I was sitting in the movie theater actually laughing out loud as Cliff just fucking tore these people apart. And with the help of his bulldog there, his lovely little bulldog, who bit Tex right in the crotch. But when he just
I love that you say his lovely little bulldog.
His lovely, and I'll tell you why I say that. But when Cliff is like smashing Susan Atkins' head into the phone and the wall, and, it's just the over-the-top Tarantino violence that, like Inglourious Bastards, is so satisfying, because it's the kind of thing you just wish had happened to these horrible fucking people. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, you wish that you could take a fucking flamethrower and torch the entire Nazi party and then blow them up, Or in this case, you wish you could take a flamethrower, as Rick does, and torch fucking Susan Atkins, that bulldog.
That was pretty funny. Him in the pool, and he's like, and he's trying to paddle away.
Yeah, because Rick doesn't know what the hell is going on. He's listening to his music out in the pool, smoking cigarettes and drinking his margarita, and this crazy.
I thought was hilarious. That was hilarious.
Yeah, and he's trying to get out of the damn pool, where he can't quite get out of the pool. And when he goes into the pool house, I was thinking, what's going on there? And then as soon as he comes out, you remember the scene earlier, which, was one of the great funny lines, where he's like, he's practicing with the flamethrower, and he's like, man, that's really hot. Can we do something about that? And the guy's like, it's a flamethrower, you know. And then he uses the flamethrower. It's this great payoff for an earlier scene. But I absolutely loved that whole bit. I gotta ask you guys' opinion. You know, obviously my opinion. I was in the theater laughing and enjoying it thoroughly. I started with Rebecca last time. Ryan, what do you think?
No, that was A plus. There's not
And,
much more you could say. That was it because we forget a lot of times, the hurt of all the lives. There were so many lives affected by these fucking douchebags. And even if it was just a fantasy, for 5 minutes in the theater, it was fun to have even theoretical retribution. It was very well done. It was just I love the whole movie, to be honest. The whole thing's great to me.
Rebecca?
I enjoyed it. The sad thing for me was when it ended, and then you hear her voice over the intercom, and then you realize that didn't happen, and that kind of makes you sad.
Yes. Yeah, there is. Yeah, that's a very good point. There is a certain melancholy sort of thing to the ending because then Rick goes up to the house and you see him with the actual 4 victims, the victims that died that night. And, Sharon is pregnant, but now she's going to have her baby and it's not going to be, murdered along with her. And there's this nice little moment. And then she invites Rick in because Rick kind of gets his opportunity because Rick's thing is, am I a part of this new age of Hollywood? Am I going to be left behind like all the old studio guys? And then you have Sharon Tate and Polanski who sort of represent the new age of Hollywood. And they're inviting him into the house, or at least Sharon Tate is because Polanski's away. And then I think the title comes back into play where you realize, oh, yeah, this whole thing, this is a fairy tale. This is the fairy tale ending. It's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And you just kind of go, I wish that fairy tale had actually been reality,
I wonder how her, I know the sister really liked it, but I wonder, watching, I'm sure she was like, yes, watching them violently kill these people.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was.
I would like to have been in the theater watching that with Deborah Tate. Just that
That's
scene.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Just see what she. Yeah.
Now this is
it was very. When you hear her voice at the end and she invites him in, it was sad because that this isn't how it ended.
Right.
So that was me.
Well, speaking of sitting in the theater watching the movie, I got to give you a little anecdotal story here. When I went to see this movie in the theater, there were these 2 old people. And this always fucking happens to me in movie theaters. They're sitting down and to the right of me, like 1 row down. And I'm digging the movie, like I was telling you, I'm driving along in the Carmen Ghia, I'm getting into this thing. And for the entire duration of this 3-hour fucking movie, these 2 old people sitting down there, who are obviously a man and wife married couple, are talking the entire time. As if we're sitting in their fucking living room. As if I am the guest in their house. Listening to their comments on the movie, which are things like, oh, you remember when we had ice cube trays like that? Oh, hey, that's an ugly dog. And I'm like, listen.
As they're beating in someone's face at that moment.
Yeah. And it's like, oh dear, is she gonna die here? What happened in real life? And I'm like, would you just shut the fuck up?
Wait, so they remember the ice cube trays, but they don't remember what happened
to Sharon Tate. No, I guess not. No, but I just, this is just my disclaimer. When you go to a movie theater, I don't care if you're a little old cute lady or not. Just be aware that you're not in your living room.
No one paid $10 to hear you talk.
That's right. I don't want to sit for 3 hours and listen to your fucking comments. The guy sitting over there, I think he's going to croak at any moment because he's going, I'm like, what are you doing to that man over there? He's groaning and moaning, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, I'm going to have to do CPR on him and then, put some tape over her mouth. But anyway.
I can't be involved.
That was my 3-hour experience watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I got a much more thorough experience when I bought it and I can now watch it in my own home. But Anyway, yes, we're going to wrap up the show now. We've gone a little bit over, but I think it was warranted. By God, we had an interesting movie to talk about. And again, this is our 100th show. The
Which,
movie.
congratulations, by the way. You put a lot of work in this shit. A lot.
Thank you.
And I've learned so much, just over the course of things we've talked about, and just the detail today. I think a lot of people could appreciate. I mean, just this last hour, the detail Tarantino goes into. There was a lot of things I didn't know that you brought up. I thought were fantastic points that you're not going to find many other places. That not many people can take the time to go that far. So I think you've done a great job.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much. I try my best to do these shows to the best of my ability. And you guys contribute a hell of a lot, too, I must say, and have for however long we've been doing this. Time-wise, I'm not sure, but yeah, 100 episodes. But as I was saying, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the final gross on the movie was like $374 million, I think, overall, which is a great return. It's the second highest grossing Tarantino film of all time, just behind Django Unchained, which made an ungodly amount of money. But
and was epic.
Yeah, and like this was epic, and it had some QT justice in it. QT justice has become something that's pretty regular nowadays with these films. Brad Pitt.
Sounds like a YouTube channel.
QT Justice. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I think so.
You should probably put it in now before someone takes it. Maybe do it before you upload the show.
TM and copyright. QT Justice. Ryan Rayonec and Elsie Holt. Brad Pitt won an Academy Reward for Best Supporting Actor for this movie. And by God, he deserved it, because I laughed my ass off at Brad Pitt in this movie. I mean, Brad Pitt is one of those guys that, when he was younger, you go, well, is it just his looks or what? The sex star thing. But then as you got older, you realize, man, this guy's really a good actor. And I think that's really what shows when you start to get older, you're not such a pretty boy anymore, and you still turn in great performances. I think that's the real defining characteristic of a good actor. It really brings into focus what you can do as opposed to what you look like. But I think it was well deserved. It was well deserved.
I was going to make a joke. I was going to throw back to Brad Pitt 1, Tom Cruise 0.
That's right, because Tom has never won an Academy Reward, as far as I know. Maybe I don't know. They've not liked each other for a long. I was going to say maybe that's Tom Cruise's problem with Brad Pitt, but he only just won the award, so had to have been something other than that. Anyway, so that's our show about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I want to thank my two co-hosts, as always. Ryan Rayonec, thank you for being here, buddy.
No problem.
And Rebecca Ivey, thank you.
Yeah.
And until next time, I want to wish you all a very good week, good weekend, and stay safe out there. Make sure to take care of yourselves.